instead of on Zoom, but I guess we should be thankful for Zoom. And I look at Zoom as one of the side effects of the pandemic. And I think another side effect of the pandemic is how much we've come to appreciate our outdoor spaces. This last few months or this last year, that was the safest place to spend time with family and friends. So I'm going to talk about outdoor spaces today. And I'm going to talk mainly about gardens in the summer, but I'm going to give just a little nod to winter to start with. Um, I live in a split level house, and when you walk in the front door, you can go upstairs or downstairs. And one of my cats prefers to live downstairs. So every morning when I gather up the cat dishes, I go downstairs, walk by the front door, and I open the door and take a few breaths of outdoor air. And it's amazing how just these few lungfuls of fresh outdoor air, even this past week, just are just a source of positive energy, just kind of reset my day, and in a good way. So, but to make sure this wasn't the only fresh air I got, this past fall, I hired Jack with his chainsaw to make me some trails in the woods that I could snowshoe on this winter. And when he did, so these were the trails. They look much different now. There's multiple more feet of snow. This was last fall. But when he made this, he made a little area he called the campsite. And it's just a nice little area that he built a bench there, moss covered bench, and you can sit there in the fall or in the spring, not so much in the middle of the winter, but and just sort of be part of the woods. It's sort of like a little room in the larger space. There's a kind of a natural opening in the woods there. And so this is kind of a little, I think of it as a little garden room in the woods that I've enjoyed this past fall and into the winter. It's pretty well snowed in now. But despite all this, I still spend more time indoors than outdoors in the winter. And of course, in the summer, it's very much the opposite. Everybody wants to spend as much time outside. I mean, there's nothing quite like an Alaskan summer. And so what I'm going to suggest over the next hour here is that we just move outdoors for the summer. And I'm going to just move your living space outside or parts of your living space. And I'm going to give you ideas on how to do that both in pictures and in words. And this outdoor space can be something as simple as just a bench off to the side of your lawn where you sit and read a book or drink coffee or visit with a friend. Just something that you would normally do inside that you're going to be doing more regularly outside. And then it can get much more complex, and you can build several, a number of outdoor garden rooms or secluded spots for different things. You'd have one for eating, another for sitting and visiting, can have a place with a hammock, things like that. So, and I'm going to give you, so I know everybody's going to have a different amount of room. If you're going to go forward with this, we all have different amounts of space in our yards. But even if you have just a lawn, you can devote a tiny section to a garden room. And I'll give you an example. This is at one end of my vegetable garden a few years back, and obviously early in the spring, the vegetable, you can see the garden is just barely getting started. And I stripped off an area about 10 by 12 square feet, 10 by 12 feet, so 120 square feet of lawn. And that was the hard part because that sod is really heavy. And then I put down geotextile fabric over the whole thing. And then I cut out an area in the center and bedded in pavers so that I had kind of a little patio area. And then at the end of this project, which was a couple weeks, but you can see the garden's not a whole lot further along. So it didn't take that long. This is what it looked like. And to the back of the chairs, there is the area under the deck, which is always an ugly area. This picture was taken through the living room window, so you've got a little extra decoration in there. But I've planted shrubs along there that will hide that area. And then along the two sides with the bricks, there's shrubs and herbaceous perennials. And the idea of this was that it would be kind of a separate space from the lawn that looked down, the main view would be down the length of the garden. So, and I'll show you more pictures of this later, but you can see that didn't take very much lawn at all. And as you'll see, it turned into a really nice little secluded spot. So it can be that simple. And as I say, just by the amount the garden has grown, you can see this didn't take long. And I did do it all myself. So it wasn't like I had to bring in equipment or someone to help me. Then you can get into bigger projects. This is my house when I first moved here. It was kind of like living in a parking lot. And if you backed up about 75, 100 feet into the foreground of this picture, you would be in the middle of Farmers Loop Road. So it was very open to Farmers Loop, very parking lot-like. And so I decided to get rid of the pavement, and you can see that the piece of machinery that's going to do it is sitting there waiting. This was the last picture before it happened. And this is what it looked like about 12 years later, looking the opposite direction. I'm looking toward Farmers Loop. The pot of gold is right in the center line of Farmers Loop. But so I'm going to refer to this kind of as my garden. And as you can see, it's lots of different little areas. It's not just one open space. So just kind of two maybe extremes there, but both very possible. I put off doing this. I moved here in 2000 to this piece of property, and I did this in 2008. And I waited that long because I thought it was going to cost so much money. And, you know, but it really, you know, there's a lot of work that went into planting it. But as far as initial cost, wasn't near as much as I expected. And it's a type of project, as you'll see, I'll show you a little more of it later, you can continue to work on. You don't have to do it all in one summer or 1 week. Okay, so if you're going to make a little spot that you're going to spend time outdoors or get yourself weaned out of the house, it can be something as simple as this. This is actually a garden on Prince Edward Island in Eastern Canada, and they just have those 2 chairs out there. I probably would have tucked them back in against those shrubs, so I had that little island of shrubs in front of it. But bottom line, you could be there reading a book or talking to a friend. People could be walking by in the lawn to other parts of the garden, and you would be in your own separate little world. So it can be something that simple. This is that same garden, another part of it. It was a massive, it was a private garden. It was open to public. You paid to go in, but it had lots of parts to it. And here, just the table and chairs are on the left-hand side. Again, you could be there and you'd be kind of separate from the rest of the garden. If you had the choice of sitting inside in a house and having lunch or sitting here, you'd probably choose to be out here. And it's, in a way, this is almost like a little Arctic entrance to the room that people are standing in with the arbor there. And because that also was very secluded, there was a couple of benches up there. And you could be using each of these little areas and not feel like you were part of the gardening crew, although it would probably be interesting to talk to them. Now, this is at my place several years ago. Things have changed a bit since this picture, but I have fond memories of the day that my brother and my niece and her husband and little boys came over, and they brought takeout food. It was a beautiful summer day. I think it was a little smoky, as you can see, but we sat there and had lunch. And I remember thinking, I never thought of this as being such a separate little secret spot in this lawn, but it was. Sitting on that bench with the Amur maples as shade and looking out toward the garden and the house, it was a separate little spot. So it can be something that simple. Instead of sitting inside and eating, we sat there, and I remember to this day how it felt. And if we'd been indoors, I probably would have long since forgotten it. This is in the Denver Botanic Garden, and first place, that's a really cool bench. But second, this was, you know, this path goes to many other parts of the garden, and they've got that bench tucked back in against the shrubs and some trees there, and this little juniper island out in front. And so if you're sitting there, you're not part of the people going by on the sidewalk. But the other thing I think I want to point out about this is that when you're sitting on a bench, you have a view of the rest of the garden, or not the whole garden, but the area around there. And I think that's real important with any kind of little garden room or secluded spot in your garden. You don't want to feel like you're in a prison or locked away from the rest of the garden. You should be able to look out and have a view of the whole thing. That's part of the beauty of being in the garden. So if you're going to make a garden room, you certainly need to have walls or something that designates that this is a separate area. And this is back to my place again. And if you remember in the original pictures, there was some kind of ugly retaining walls, and we retained those retaining walls. We had to, and we washed them with kind of blue-gray paint on one side. The north side did kind of a gray-green, and repaired some holes in them. And but these became kind of the walls of this whole big garden, and actually gives it a sunken garden feeling. So, and it's almost like these are the walls of the house. There's little rooms within it, which we'll talk about more in a bit. And then the rest is outside, even though it's also contained. But here it's retaining walls that gave definition to the space. Now this was near Portland, and these people, everything was close together. So this fence is the fence for the people on the other side as well. And so the people on this side of it, this was their backyard, and that's where their garden was. They had just taken this wall, kind of, put some barn paint on it, and pasted a window on it and a door, and put some, an old hand lawnmower and some tools back there, and just gave a really nice wall for their garden. So you can do real whimsical things like that. And then this was a place in Colorado, and same thing, the fence belongs to people on both sides. And the person on this side had the length of the fence. She had laid out probably 4 or 5 different garden rooms. And her walls, you see that she put a couple of logs up right down there and a brick there. But mainly her walls, or what defined her rooms, was the furniture. So this was the office, and she had a desk and a mailbox. And I remember there was a telephone somewhere, which was obvious, and must have been, I don't know if it was on the tree, but it doesn't show up in the picture. And then the room next to it was a real, kind of a fairy tale type of room. I mean, it had little figurines and whirligigs and colored rocks. She had one that was like a children's playroom with a sandbox and toys. And then at the far end, she had a raised area, which was like a living room. I mean, you look at that and you think of a living room, it's coffee table, couch with cushions on it. And she included some potted plants to kind of add to the definition of that space. But it was a clever idea to separate out different sections of the garden. Now this is back at my place again, and when I first moved here, I built my own fence that went off my deck so my cats could be outdoors but wouldn't be in Farmer's Loop. And then when I did the big garden, I got the whole place professionally fenced, which was a huge upgrade because I built my own fence and it was pretty hokey. But so I took it down, but I left a little section of it there on the left. You can see it, the section of fence and the door that I built into it. And then on the right here, you can see it. That was in the fall, and this is in the summer. I put nasturtiums at the base of it and sweet peas on it. And just that door to nowhere, that little section of fence, that Amur maple, gives a lot of definition to this, what we call the kitchen area. And if it weren't there, I mean, there's the retaining wall on one side, but that would be fairly open. But just this little indication of a wall creates quite a bit of boundary to that. Now this is another place in my garden, and the one, if coming forward in the foreground here, part of the background of the foreground is the retaining wall, then the cedar fence, and then there's junipers and 9-barks and dogwoods and things like that. So shrubs along the back. But in the front, there's the gate there, the window gate, that's one entrance. And then you can see on the left here, there's some stepping stones and then a lot of shrubs, which looking the other way, looking back in there, you can see that one of the walls of this room is primarily shrubs and tall herbaceous perennials. You can see lilies, yarrow, ligularia, and then of course the dogwood, and there's mock orange there too. So the border of that room being a lot of it's provided with shrubs. This is another area at my place. This used to be, this is on the south side of my house, and it looks down an open field down toward Fiedler Road. And so for many years you could drive by in Fiedler, look up across the field, across my lawn, right into the windows of my house. And it is fenced now, and there's a fence on the other side of these trees and shrubs, but the fence is not for privacy. It's only to keep moose out and cats in. And so so here we're providing the wall of this area with trees and shrubs. There's a lodgepole pine on the left. There's Amur chokecherry, Canada red chokecherry. There's a mock orange, and then this real bushy shrub in the foreground. There's a couple of honeyberries there, and they make a really nice barrier. They're very thick. Now look at this. This is in Seattle, and these houses were close together, but each one of these places had an outdoor space between the street and the house. That didn't just lead up to the door, but it was the secluded part of it was created with shrubs and trees. Now that is a massive hedge. But it was, and on the other side of it, I mean, they had like little fire pits or benches or something like that. So you couldn't just look at the front door of the house, and there was something between you and the front door of the house, but all of the wall or the border of it provided with shrubs, woody shrubs. Now this is the little, what I'm going to call the dining room, the room that I built at the end of the garden when I took out a little piece of the lawn. And this is a couple years after it was built. So if you were sitting in the chair there, you would look to your left and see the vegetable garden. Behind you would be the area under the deck, which you can see is already very nicely covered with shrubs. And then the other walls, and I'll show you another picture later, it's even more grown up now, but it's very separate, and the entrance to it is over there on the other side of the 9-bark. And but everything here being provided with woody shrubs or the herbaceous perennials. You see the yarrow, the pearl yarrow, and a couple of the other yarrows, terracotta over there, and I'm not sure which one this is. And then there's a lily back in there by the 9-bark, and there's also peonies in there. So another way to create walls or kind of definition to your rooms is actually with rock walls. And these are stacked, this is Brownsville quarry rock, just stacked rocks, nothing holding them together. Occasionally one falls off. And they're not real tall, 2 feet at the most, but they give guidance to that and separate out the different areas of that garden. Like if you look at that little area of lawn to the right of the bicycle, there's a flat rock bench as you enter it, and that's pretty contained. It's contained by perennials. There's an annual bed and the wall. And these walls are short. Hootsie can't see over them, but a normal person, they're easy to see over. So you can see the whole garden from, they don't obstruct your view. Now this is a garden in near Colorado Springs. I went there on a bus on a garden tour. I have no idea where I was. I don't even know whose garden it was, but it's the most beautiful garden I've ever seen, and I probably could never go back. But they had lots of little separate garden rooms or seating areas. And this one is created basically with potted plants. There's a little bit of a fence back there, but most of it is potted plants. So anybody can do that. You can take a little area of your lawn and put a bunch of potted plants around and a little piece of outdoor furniture, and you've got a secluded spot. This was the same garden, a different place in it, and here they have some pavers, so that kind of indicates it's a separate spot, and lots of potted plants. I think this tree in the foreground was actually also in a pot, and this one you can see a real definite entrance to it or exit, depending on your point of view. And I'll talk more about entrances in a minute, but that also tells you you're going into a room, and then the perimeters of it are defined by these potted plants. And just one more of that same garden. This one, there was like a trellis or arbor, I think, in more taller shrubs, but a lot of potted plants too, and then the patio floor. But all just separate little areas in this huge garden that you just wanted to sit there and spend time. Now this is what I call my bedroom. It's the porch or the deck at my place. And this was last summer and it rained a lot. So I had pulled a lot of plants in, and there's a bunch of plants in the foreground here that you can't see. But the idea is this deck is very open. It looks down toward Fiedler Road. And I have tons of potted plants. There's a hanging basket hangs at the foot of the bed there, and I have things up on the rails when it's not pouring rain, or it just seemed like it rained a lot, so I was tired of deadheading petunias. So again, just potted plants creating a screen or an edge to this area. And then here again, potted plants. This is that kitchen area again. The door to nowhere is on the left. You can't see it. But these pots tell you this is another wall of this room. And it all shows you where the entrance is. Now, entrances. Since you don't have high walls and ceilings and roofs on your room, it's nice to have an entrance that gives the idea of we're going in someplace different. So this is at my place a few years back, and this goes back into a little room. I call it the butterfly bench room, and you can see the mock orange are in full bloom here. So this is in late June. This is another view looking down that entrance. So you're walking toward the cedar fence that would then faces Farmer's Loop. And then when you get in, oops, sorry, you guys, get hasty here. That's what it looks like when you get in there. There's a little bench back in there, and behind it are the shrubs that are against the cedar walls. So, and there's some herbaceous perennials. The blue flower here is catmint that you can see on the right-hand side, which you can see is getting quite tall and knitting up among the mock orange. This is obviously a different time of year than the other two slides. The mock orange is done blooming. And I want to show you this because this is what that area looked like maybe a couple years or a year after I planted it. You could tell that it was going to be a separate little area, but not real private yet. So you don't want to get discouraged and think, oh, when is this going to turn into a separate area? It actually happens amazingly fast. But this is I think this was the first year after I had done that. And then, entrances, they're what people see first. And here, this is in Seattle, and there was on the other side of this, there was like a little outdoor, there was a bench or some benches, and like I think there's a little fire pit thing. And so, there's something between this entrance and the house. But the entrance, as you can see from both people looking at it here, just makes you curious and makes you want to go in there. I think it's a Japanese maple. I was taking a class down at the time down there in landscaping, and they were talking about how nice it is to have a small tree that kind of arches over your entrance, and that this was an example of that. So an inviting entrance for your outdoor space, invites people in. Now, when houses are close together, a lot of time, in places maybe other than Fairbanks, there'll be these alleys between the houses, and these alleys can quickly become sort of blue tarp areas. And so this person had put her potting bench in there. This alley leads to the back of the house where the garden was or is. And it's real active potting bench. You can see she's got some things she's been cutting back there. She's got her little water source there. It makes you feel like you're in an active area. This was not for show, and it's on the way to the results of the work that she was doing here. And this was another alley. This one was in Colorado. And again, the garden oftentimes gardens are in the back of the houses. And so this is could be an ugly area. There's some utility things there, and that window trim maybe needs to be painted. But what an inviting place. She had put this gate made out of a window, and there were some plants in the dirt, and then there were potted plants as well. And it led you to, what led you to the garden. And my son and daughter-in-law just bought a house near Boulder that has an alley like this, and I cannot wait to go down there and micromanage their alley for them. Part of, an entrance can be a path to it. And this is looking into that red bench room that we looked at from a different angle. But as you walk along, these pavers, the paver path makes you feel like you're headed somewhere. And of course, the gate makes, when you pass through that, you feel like you've entered something. And most of you have seen these before, but this is down at the Plant Kingdom, and this is the entrance, to the big long strip of perennials. And of course, the paver path makes you feel like you're headed somewhere, but the arbor, which this is a double arbor, I took it head-on picture so it doesn't look like it's double, but scarlet runner beans. And you know, that if just the path were there, it wouldn't be nearly as inviting as having something like this that kind of, you know, gets people's curiosity. And then on the right hand side here is Elsie Mae. I think mannequins are a lot of fun, and Elsie Mae used to live at the Plant Kingdom, and now she lives at my house. But you know, mannequins or something like this, I mean, well, mannequin, you can put it at the entrance to your garden room, and it can say, you know, come on in, exit, enter, you know, slippery when wet, whatever. So if you like doing fun things like that, well, you can use a mannequin. And I am flipping this around. Okay, so this is the entrance to my main garden, kind of as it is now. Well, not as it is now, but in the summertime. So you come in here, and on the left-hand side is the door, and if you to the house, and if you turned right, you could make a hard right into that little room with the butterfly bench, or if you went straight right, you would go into the red bench room. And then if you go a little further past the door, you come to this island bed of perennials, which creates kind of one of the walls of this lawn area up here that is pretty secluded. You know, it has rock walls, and it's up against the path and the retaining wall. So if you go straight ahead here, on the left would be the steps up to where the deck and the bedroom, the bed, and then straight ahead would be the kitchen area. This is on one, well, it's in one part of my separate from my main garden. And it's an alley of hot wings and Amur maples, and it leads up to the greenhouse, and then an area behind the greenhouse that again is a very separate area. It's defined by shrubs and a fence, a cedar fence. And then the north side of the greenhouse has a lot of big potted begonias along the sidewalk. And so that's the south border of this area. So it's on a sloping lawn. It goes to a bigger area. It's a bigger kind of path. And then you saw this picture one like it before, but here I wanted to, instead of focusing on the walls, focus on the paths. So these paths kind of wind through here. These are the hallways of your garden house. And, you know, if you wanted to walk down there and go through the purple gate, you know, you don't have to make a mad dash across the lawn. You're guided there by these paths. So paths through the, you know, designated walking areas can add a lot to the different and connect the different parts of your garden, make it feel, even though it's sort of chopped up, that it's a whole thing. This is that garden in Prince Edward Island again, and I like this because this is a cool entrance. You know, if you walk along the sidewalk, it takes a left there and goes into a totally separate area of the garden. But what an inviting path! You know, there's little vignettes as you go along it, and there about halfway there is a place that you can step off. I think that was, it looks like that was just a potting bench, but I think there was actually a little area to sit there too. So inviting ways to pull people into your garden, whether it's broken into separate little garden rooms or not. Each of these little spaces, as you can see, had very different kinds of plants in them. And then another alley, this was in Colorado again, and you look at that, and the garden was in back of the house, and it would be really easy to just kind of have people walk through the house, so you didn't have them walking through this area that you know is not necessarily, it looks to me like there's a number of utility things there, but they've made it beautiful. You know, they put down some bark, randomly threw in some pavers, built a little sidewalk, and on the left there you can see that little bench, which this is it close up. It was a whole little separate area. It was like a I think of Arctic entrance, and I guess you could think of front porch if you didn't always think about snow and cold. But you could be right there, and people be heading to the backyard where the garden is, and you know, you're in your own private little space. I thought it was a very cool way to make an entrance very, very pleasant, and an entrance that went through what could be not a particularly pretty area of the property. Okay, let me just make sure I didn't skip too much. No, okay. So then also another way to tell people, hey, go this way is with stepping stones. We saw this a little bit earlier, but this is looking across the annual beds at the little red bench area. And those stepping stones are just forms of leaves made in cement and then embedded in the grass. And they, tell people this is a place to come. And this is at the Plant Kingdom a number of years ago, but the idea here was, and we have since covered this geotextile, it's been removed, and we have put flat stone, local stone all through there, so as a stone floor or rock floor. So the idea here is you have, rock pavers or like cement pavers in the grass, and then you go in the stone, and we left circles of grass, so you have grass pavers in the stone floor, and it guides you through this. These gardens have grown up a lot more, so they're a bit more like separate garden rooms, but it guides you through them and out into the lawn, into the next set of gardens. So it can be something that simple. And then finally, just potted plants. These are on the steps that go up onto my deck where the bed is, and there, like I say, there's lots more plants up there. Oh, hold on. I should not talk with my hands. And so even this, if you're walking by and the flowers catch your eye and you look up, then it's going to invite you to come up there. So another way to make the entrance, and as you can see, Pesto has definitely taken the bait. Why was it? There it goes. Okay, so now I want to show you real quickly, just a couple of actual, how some of these projects can happen. So they aren't just magic, but they're not that hard to do. So this again is my house that when I first owned it, and it almost looked better in the winter than the summertime. And so after we scraped off the pavement, we were building that little house, or remodeling that little house in the background for my mom, and we had put in a septic. And so we took some of the river lusk from that and brought the pavement, brought it all up to grade after the pavement was gone. So not the greatest soil, and it's quite compacted under it. So, but it still worked. So then what I did is I laid down geotextile fabric on the whole thing. It's about 40 by 70 feet. And, some people like geotextile fabric, some people don't. I have a love-hate relationship with it. But you can, in some places, sometimes you leave it in place and you cut holes in it or cut X's and excavate, put your plant in, tuck the fabric down around the stem, and it's very good for weed control. So, and I oftentimes plant that way, and then you can put bark mulch on it to make it look nice. But whatever I'm going to do here, I laid it down, and it's a great way to draw out your garden. So I laid down hoses, the Flexilla hoses. If you're used to that or familiar with that brand, they're real pliable. They work well to make, they work well for this type of thing. So I laid out paths, laid out where the rock walls are going to be, tried to figure out where everything was roughly going to be before I planted anything, even though, as you can see, I was starting to cheat a little bit and bring some plants in. And so then this is what it looked like the next summer. And you can see there's a lot left to be done. There's still geotextile showing on the left here. I planted a few shrubs, you can see, but also there's some tomato pots there taking advantage of the sunshine that you can see here in the foreground along the right-hand side of that rock wall that we were putting in some perennials. I'm going to plant them directly through the typar. And then on the right-hand side there where the urn is, the geotextile was, or typar, whatever you want to call it, was in place. And I just put bark mulch on it just to kind of decorate it, put that pot on it. I wanted to wait a few years to decide what I was going to do there. Eventually, I took out the mulch, cut out the typar, and planted a perennial garden straight into the soil. And then I took cut the geotextile out where I put lawn and where I had the annual beds. And you can see above the retaining wall, it's just lawn yet. You can see down by the cedar fence, the shrubs are just growing up, but they wouldn't be providing much privacy. So I was glad I had the cedar fence. And then this is what it looked like. Actually, this was taken this summer. So you can see that would have been a period of about 11 years and of course, much more enjoyable space than the pavement. And this was just a picture taken across the yard last year. I really should have included a picture of what it looks like now, but I won't. So then this is another project that's in progress. So you can see how you can develop these little spaces from the get-go. When I sold the Plant Kingdom 4 years ago, for the first time in a long time, I didn't have a greenhouse. So I endured that for about 2 years. And then in the fall of 2018, spring of 2019, I got a greenhouse built at my place. And I kept thinking we were done with the dirt work and that I could start planting. And it really wasn't until the middle of 2019 that that was true. So this deck along the south side of it is about 40 feet long. It's exactly 40 feet long. And I laid 2 pieces of geotextile, one's 12 feet wide, one's 15. So the planting space is about 27 by 40. And once you lay the geotextile, the pressure is off. No weeds can come up. You've got your canvas for 1 year or 10 years or whatever. And you can see I started laying down some hoses again to kind of figure out what I was going to do. And I decided pretty soon, maybe not soon enough, we'd already laid the typar, but we pulled it back up and decided we should have kind of a dry creek bed or dry stream bed, because the gutter, the downspout from the gutter comes off on the right-hand corner of the greenhouse. And now there's a big wine barrel there that take the gutter, or the downspout feeds into that, and there's a diverter. When it fills, then the water shoots out under the deck and comes down this dry creek bed. And so then what we did is we pulled the typar back in place. There's a divot there for, we're going to put some rocks in there. And then we got some flat rocks from a place that sells flat rocks. And because this is kind of a hillside, and made some kind of steps. And you can see we started planting plants through the geotextile there. Whoa. So this is what it looked like then at the kind of close to the end of that summer of 2019. The dry creek is in place. A bunch of plants have been planted. I put fine bark mulch where the paths were going to be, and bark nuggets on the planted surfaces. The area where the bobcat had been part of the field, so it was pretty rough. I got a lawn put in. The lawn is actually pretty rough too, but I probably should just left it and planted it with flowers, but that was what was going on. And then at the end of fall of 2019, late in the fall, you can see the shrubs have been frozen. This is what it looked like. And I'd laid out where future beds are going to be. It looks kind of like dotted lines because I used river rock to separate things. But once they're planted, you won't notice that. And then the thing to notice about this is the only woody things here are along this south side. The rest is all going to be herbaceous perennials. And that's what's going to separate things. So this is just what it looked like this summer. So a year after it was planted. This is that upper corner at the top of the stream bed. There's a bench there. I need to take those supports off so you can sit on it. But it's already kind of private. It already is a little separate area of this bigger garden. And this is looking down the stream bed from the bench area. Notice the turtle head, the plant with the pink flowers, and in the lower left corner there. That's a herbaceous perennial. So herbaceous perennials can get quite tall, and they can give as much privacy as shrubs do. And then this was it late in the summer. You can see of this past summer. You can see that being that it was 2020 and I was home all the time, I got some of the areas planted. They're right up against the deck there. You can see all those zinnias. So I had a little area of annuals there that was that I'll plant each year. It has bulbs like tulips and daffodils and things like that. And then I put annuals in once they're done. So I still have lots of area to plant. Some is partially planted. The part that I've partly planted, I have a plan for. There's different bloom times and colors of plants and heights, all part of the major plan. And I just want to show you that, herbaceous perennials can be tall. This is an oriental trumpet lily, which they can get 5 feet tall. And then there's tansy behind it, which again is real tall. So you can do a lot with herbaceous perennials for setting boundaries. This is just another little area of the garden looking back toward that alley of Amur maples. upper corner of it, and you can see the deck is already, it's just fun to have all these different separate spaces within your whole garden. So you can see there that the potted plants are creating privacy for that, and these perennials are growing up, and they eventually will give quite a bit of, will add to the privacy of the deck. You'll be able to sit in the chaise lounge and be not really visible from Fiedler Road. So I just want to show you some views from these different gardens. This is looking into that little red bench room, and you can see that this island of perennials connects with the gate, and then the shrubs on the right kind of narrow down with the stepping stones that show you the entrance there, and the gate shows you another entrance. This is from the kitchen area looking out across the garden. You have kind of a view of the whole garden, but you also have the feeling of little separate spaces that you can't actually see into. This is the bedroom area, and I didn't this summer because I was having some remodeling done in my house, but I've slept out there many summers. It's a great place to sleep. There's a polycarbonate roof, and it truly is a real bedroom. And then there's even a little outdoor shower. This is by the door to nowhere, and there's a paver base around this, and this is the shower that is, it's connected with a hose to the south side of the house. So on a hot summer day, this blue poppy is a warm shower. This is the little dining room area, and as you can see, it's pretty private now. This is looking up toward the greenhouse. Another view looking down the garden. That was not this summer, but you can see that the veggies themselves create kind of definition to that room. They are the area of the main that you tend to look. But if you look at the amaranthus there, I've got flowers in with the vegetables. The amaranthus is pretty tall. And then this is looking in when you're outside the room, the dining room with the little red table, and you can see that you really can't see into it very much, which is kind of the way you want it. When you're in it, you can look out, but it has privacy from the outside. This is the view out of that little red bench room. Again, you can see a lot of the garden when you're in there. And then this is the butterfly bench room. Remember that we walked down through the mock orange, and this is looking out toward that island of perennials that it took me a while to plant, that I had the urns sitting on the bark mulch for a while. And that's a gold heart dicentra, a beautiful, beautiful herbaceous perennial, and tall. I mean, that's at least probably 4 feet tall. And then one of the cool things about, well, the cool thing about gardens is all the different views from this, especially when you have all these little separate spaces. So the bedroom or the deck is neat because there's uprights on the railing. And so you feel like you're looking out windows. So this is looking out toward that area that I told you about north of the greenhouse that the alley of maples kind of leads to. And there's some chairs out there. There's a whole bunch of pots of the big tuberous begonias along the north side of the greenhouse, and shrubs at both ends, and then the gate with the little window door in it. This is another view looking out from the deck, but notice how you look across and you can tell there's a garden over there. You can see a little bit of the garden on the south side of the greenhouse, just enough to make you feel like you're a part of it and you'd like to go there. You're not separated from it. Another view from the deck or the windows of the bedroom. Now this is, I want to say a little bit about vegetables as garden rooms. This is in that little dining room looking down the veggie garden, which is what I envisioned when I put that together, that this would be your main view. You can be sitting there drinking coffee and thinking about what you're going to have for lunch. And I do kind of think, as if you want to think of this whole outdoors as being a house, I think of this as my refrigerator or my pantry. And so if you notice down at the far end there, there's an arbor of scarlet runner beans, which this is a different view, different year. But if you walk in through that little arbor, number one, scarlet runner beans are delicious. I don't, oh, I see the kitty. I don't grow bush beans anymore at all. I just harvest my scarlet runner beans when they're young. And so you walk under this arbor that's producing food and looking beautiful, and it's the entrance to your pantry. And to the right is carrots and onions, but also the perennial part of the garden. So there's asparagus and garlic and tarragon, things like that. And then if you turn to the left, you're into the part that you can see here. And remember that garden in Colorado that had all the gorgeous little seating rooms? They also had a vegetable garden, and this one really reminds me of a pantry because they had each one of these little plots, which was maybe 4 by 4, maybe something like that. Had a separate, there were herbs, there was one with peppers, there was one with squash, there's one with beans. So they were all different. And so it really had that feeling of shelves in a pantry. And of course, this is the plant kingdom. This is the vegetable garden we do there. We do something different in that garden every year. But it is, it's kind of part of one of the walls of the perennial garden. And usually we put tall things to the back, like sunflowers or tripods with climbing beans or corn. Even just amaranthus is another good one that's tall. And then, you can mix flowers with vegetables. Maybe not so much perennials. You could do perennials with it, but these are annuals. And the theme this particular year was white flowers and colored vegetables. But you can, your vegetables can be, or edible things can be decorative, create boundaries in your garden, and really be beautiful. And this is in the wall of that of the dining room garden, the one that I built at the end of the veggie garden. And this is Carmen jewel cherry shrub. And first thing in the spring, it's covered with flowers. And then you get the cherries. This was early on, they weren't, still developing, but they have a long, there were cherries on that for well over a month. And then they're beautiful cherries. I pitted them and I have cherries in my freezer now. So it's creating beauty, creating a wall of your garden room, and food as well. Same thing with the honeyberries. They're really good to eat. Remember the honeyberries at the south side of the lawn, and they are good for people, but robins love them too. So if you want to encourage birds in your yard, honeyberries are, and they're prolific, and they have berries on them for a lot of the summer. It's not a real short season. And I also have apple trees along that south border. You didn't see those in the picture, but again, a way to create privacy or definition to parts of your garden. Apple trees are not huge, so they don't block your view that much, and a good source of food. So you need an entrance to your garden, as we have here. You have, places to relax, to sit and have a cup of coffee or take a nap. You can have a bedroom area, as I have, which is on my deck, or you can have something like this that says you could have a hammock here and say, hey, this is a place to stop and take a rest. This is a place to, or you could just have this for, just for beauty, but it's also fun to use it to signify a room in your garden. And then, of course, a kitchen area. This summer, this is about the only place I got together with my family was outdoors here. And this is kind of a kitchen area and a dining area. And of course, an outdoor living room. This is, again, that garden in Colorado that I just could hardly get enough of. And very simple here. I mean, you could just, there's some pavers here, but you could just take a little area of your lawn, put a piece of outdoor furniture, put out some, plant some big potted plants, and you've got a little private space. And it's amazing how much time you will spend in a space like that. And it's a great way to use Alaska in the summertime. And then, of course, for some, all it takes is one potted plant, and you think that you have a view of the garden and you're invisible to everybody else. So that's what I have to say. If there's any questions, I would like to answer them. But first, I wanted to say, just tell you a little bit about how I used the pandemic besides my garden. I have this book that is just being published by University of Alaska Press, and it's coming out May 15th. It's at the printer right now. And the reason I mention it here is, well, number one, I'm excited about it. And then the second reason is that if you are contemplating maybe putting in some perennials or trees and shrubs and making a little garden room in your lawn or some part of your yard, you might need this book. It basically, it's Northern Garden Symphony is the title, and its subtitle is Combining Hardy Perennials for Blooms All Season. And the way it's laid out, it addresses perennial gardening in northern climates, which is a little bit different than other parts of the world. And then the second focus of it is the sequential nature of perennial blooms. You know, annuals, you plant them, and once they start blooming, they bloom all summer. Perennials have a specific bloom time. Most of them bloom for a period of maybe a month to 6 weeks at some point during the summer. But of course, the beauty of them is that they return each spring without your having to plant them. And so what I've done is taken about 250 perennials that are hardy in an interior Alaska type climate and describe them. And then I have a group of charts. There's charts that assort these 250 plants by color. There's a group, different colors, about 7 different color groups. And then there's charts that group them by height, like short, medium, tall. And then the part that I love most, the charts that sort these perennials by their bloom time. So early, mid, late season. And so the idea of it is that you want something to be blooming at any one point in time. You want to make sure some of your perennials are blooming. And so in a way, it's like a symphony. Not everybody is necessarily playing all the time, but at any one point, somebody needs to be playing. And so these charts make it pretty cookbook, paint by number, putting together a perennial garden. You can say, I want a plant that has red flowers, that blooms early in the season and is tall. And you can go to your charts and pick out a plant like that, so that you can end up with a garden that, you know, is color coordinated the way you want it, has heights in the right places, and that is blooming. You want to have about a third early blooming, third mid blooming, and a third late blooming, and the charts will allow you to do that. So this book is already, it's available for pre-sale, of course, on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and places like that already. And it'll be in, well, we don't have many bookstores in Fairbanks, but Barnes & Noble, and it'll be at the Plant Kingdom. And I put my contact information over here. I'll have books too, but also maybe more importantly, if you have any questions or thoughts, 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10 days from now, feel free to contact me. My email and texting, or I actually answer my phone. So any one of those ways, I love to talk to people about gardening. So if you have a question later on, please get hold of me. So I'll stop there. And are there any questions?
I have a question that relates to outdoor living spaces. What do you do about mosquitoes?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that, because somebody asked that in Anchorage and we didn't get a chance to answer it. It's a good question, because I, for the first time in my life, live in a place, it's pretty open where I am. And we have it's a little windier than I'm used to. I mean, there's oftentimes a breeze. And so last year was a little bit of an exception, but in general, the mosquitoes have not been a big problem for me. But other than that, if they're not, and of course you could think, well, how can you sleep outside? But I've actually never really I've had more trouble sleeping in my house in Two Rivers with mosquitoes than mosquitoes outdoors on the porch or on the deck here. But, I think it's like everything else. If you're going to be outdoors, I'm a great believer in the Citronella Bug Repellent, but I really don't have to use it here. So I guess it depends on where you are. The more open you are, and that's a nice thing about, I guess I've come to believe, my first place I lived, my first cabin, I had, trees right outside my back door. I've come to love open space a little more. I mean, of course, partly is the fire protection thing. It's kind of nice to know that you're a little ways away from the nearest black spruce, but also, with a garden, I have a lot of birds in my yard, and the more varied plant life you had, the more birds, more insects. And so you can, I like having it more open. It took me a while, but I've come to be okay with cutting trees down and putting in, less mosquito friendly, more open, so you get more movement of air. Good question though.
I have a question.
How do you handle all?
Oh, go ahead.
I have a question about the fabric on the ground. I have a beautiful area that's a garden of rocks, not just a garden of rocks with a few plants in it.
Mhm.
And, but I have a problem with equisetum
Yeah.
because it, you know, roots from itself. And do you have any ideas for keeping that down other than hiring a kid to
Yeah.
come and weed for me?
Yeah, equisetum, I have more equisetum, in my area than I wish. And it will, that is the one big advantage of a geotextile fabric. And I know Type R is a brand name, but it's the heavy duty stuff that they put under roads. It's what we use on the floor, like in the nursery and the greenhouse at Plant Kingdom, we've got it in the nursery and in the greenhouses. It's very, very tough. And, it's not organic, but it does help a lot with weeds. Now, one thing that happens is, okay, so you put down the geotextile and you cut a hole, an X, and you put your plant in there and you can get a few weeds right around that, where they can push up where you had it cut. But that's easy enough to deal with. But then over time, and of course, usually people put down, you can put rock, or I kind of like bark mulch better because it's easier to freshen up and move around sometimes than rock is. But you'll get, leaves, dust, dead, leaves and things off the plants. And so you build a little bit of earth on top of the Type R over time. But that you can kind of swish around because the weeds can't usually get their roots into the ground. They can't get through the Type R. And I always say, one of the worst nightmares I ever saw, and it wasn't mine, was somebody's house where it was on kind of a hill, and they had brought in tons of, big rock, big rock from Browns Hill Quarry. And they had put down a whole bunch of weed fabric first, but they had just gotten the weed fabric that was on a roll, kind of lightweight, the gray stuff. And so they had all this rock, and now they had equisetum and pigweed and things like that coming up through it because it could get through that stuff. So it was going to be it was be horrible. You couldn't move those big rocks. They had all that. I don't know what they were going to do. But so if you're going to use weed, a geotextile fabric, use something good, and well, actually.
I had somebody come in and do this, and I think it was pretty heavy. I don't know exactly what it is.
Okay. So,
and it is mostly the equisetum that I see.
Yeah. And it's probably maybe
some vinegar or hot water or anything like that.
Well, no, it's got runners, so it's really hard to totally get rid of that stuff. But some years are just worse than others. It seemed to me last year it was thriving. That was my feeling. But no, it is a hard one to get rid of. And I think the best thing with any kind of weeding is just to look at it as something that makes you be in the garden. And so, I'm not just trying to be a Pollyanna there. If you can just get out and just pull out what you can see, that's about the best you can do, because it will, even with it sounds like you've got a good installation, you're still going to get stuff falling in from the top. So I don't have the best answer. There's things you can spray. There's probably chemicals, but that isn't why you have a garden.
Right.
Yes, Sharon.
Yes, it's about maintenance. You've got a lot of plants in your space. And what about watering? How do you handle that? It looks like they need a lot of watering every day. Is that right?
No, because one thing I didn't mention, well, two things. First, all of that pavement was it's all on the north side of my house. So even though that's the beauty of Alaska, that even the north side has enough sun for sun plants. So that helps a little bit. I don't have as much sun, but the other thing that I do, I'm a great believer in grass clippings. And, I know lawns can be, lawns are, again, a love-hate sort of thing. Some people don't like lawns. And I don't like lawns that, I've never used weed and feed. and I don't water my lawn. I mean, it is what it is. I do keep it. I have one of those robotic lawn mowers that works really well. So it's constantly cutting it and constantly mulching it. But I also have a tractor with since I don't mow my lawn and bag the clippings, I have a tractor with a trailer that is a vacuum. And so I gather clippings, but you could do it in your own lawn with a bagger, you know, on your mower. And so I mulch all my beds that are not planted in the geotextile. I have some that are straight in the ground, some that are through the geotextile. The ones that are planted straight in the ground, I mulch them with several inches of grass clippings a couple times a season. And that works wonderful for holding moisture in, keeping weeds down, and building up your soil. So I love grass clippings. Of course, you can't do that if you use weed and feed because that'll harm your plants. But my watering I don't like the area in front of the greenhouse. My greenhouse has a water tank, so I don't want to use that water. I only use that to water the greenhouse. And I can stretch a hose over there and have a flip-flop sprayer. But someone else asked me that question in Anchorage, and again, we didn't get to the question, but I know it looks like it'd be all that I do is water, but that's not the case. My greenhouse watering is a much bigger problem. And you know, Fairbanks, like, it depends on the summer too. If you get the right kind of summer, it can be hot during the day, and then if we get thunder showers at night, that takes care of the watering. The one thing that I do water more carefully is my vegetable garden. So that is direct south, hot sun, up kind of close to the house. And so I do, but I hand water it because our water is it makes a lot of marks on the house. And so I do, you know, if I have a sprayer it gets any spray on the house. So I hand water the garden, and I have it all mulched with grass clippings. So mulch makes a big difference. And the geotextile with the bark mulch on it, you know, that holds in moisture.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, that was good. I thank you for it. Those are two questions that got asked in Anchorage and I didn't get to answer. So I'm really glad you guys asked. Anything else?
This has been great.
Well, thank you guys for inviting me. I really appreciate it. It's always fun to talk about gardening, especially when they're predicting 20 below in a couple nights.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, and thank you, Joy. So
Thank you,
are we
Joy.
done?
I have one last question if you've got a second.
I do, Jennifer.
You know, the last few days, but all this last couple of years, we've had wind that we've never had before.
Mm-hmm.
Have you any thoughts about that? You're talking about building up, you know, shrubs and hardy perennials so they have height.
Mm-hmm. Are they going to get wind damage, you mean?
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about it?
No, well, the good thing, of course, is the mosquito thing.
Right, that's good.
You know, but you know, I agree. We've got more wind. I never thought of, you know, Fairbanks as being windy like Two Rivers. No, that's different. That was windy. Wind was part of living in Two Rivers. So it still doesn't seem real windy to me, but yeah, wind is, and I mean, I always thought about wind with the greenhouses because those big Quonset greenhouses, you know, you just greenhouses and airplanes don't like wind. But I don't think it's the level of wind yet that it's a problem. But I tell you, you guys, it is one reason again to think about having trees back away from your place, because like I've had to cut trees, especially around the little house we built for my mom, because you know because you can have trees falling, which is something, you know, I never really thought of that as, you know, growing up in Alaska, I never thought about trees falling on houses, but it is something. So sometimes it's nice to be able to kind of determine what tall things are going to be where and how close they are to your house. Okay, well, you guys, happy gardening, and hopefully the snow will melt fast, but not so fast that we have floods.
Will you stop the share on your screen?
Oh yeah, okay, I will. Thank you. Okay, thanks for telling me to do that.
I have one more question.